Hello students, let's move towards the new topic of digital marketing subject, that is classification of e-commerce. So before we start for this topic, let us try to understand what is e-commerce or electronic commerce. Electronic commerce or e-commerce is a business model that lets firm and individuals buy and sell things over the internet. So when we use the internet for buying and selling, that can be termed as an electronic commerce or e-commerce. So the e-commerce is classified into 4 different parts. So that is called as a classification of e-commerce. Depending on the parties involved in the transaction, e-commerce can be classified into 4 models. So the first model is business to business model, which is called as a B2b model. Then business to consumer model, which is called as a B2c model. Consumer to consumer model, which is called as a C2c model, and last, consumer to business model, that is called as a C2b model. Now let us try to understand each and every model in detail by using some figures. Now in B2b e-commerce, at both the sides there are businessmen, means the transaction is done in between 2 businesses. B2b e-commerce refers to a business selling a goods or services to another business, like a manufacturer and wholesaler, or a wholesaler and a retailer. Business to business e-commerce isn't consumer facing and usually involves products like raw material, software, or products that are combined. So let us try to understand this model with the help of the figure. So what happens, at one side there is a seller who is a businessman and a buyer is also a businessman. There is no lay person or common man is involved in this particular transaction. At the both side, businessmen are there. So at the first stage, the businessman or a seller businessman hosts the product details on the internet. Then at the other end, in the second stage, what happens? The buyer businessman accesses the product information on the internet. Then the buyer businessman places an order for the product on the internet, and then at the fourth stage, the seller businessman receives the order, processes and dispatches the product to the buyer businessman. So at the both side there are businessmen. So one businessman can be a wholesaler and second businessman can be a retailer. So there is no consumer, common consumer is involved in this transaction. The B2b model involves electronic transaction or ordering, purchasing, as well as other administrative tasks between houses. It includes trading goods such as business, subscriptions, professional services, manufacturing, and wholesale dealings. Sometimes in B2b model, businesses may exist between virtual companies, neither of which may have any physical existence. Let's look at an example. ABC company sells automobile parts and XYZ company assembles these parts and then sells the automobile to the consumers. So XYZ company comes across the website of ABC and finds it suitable. So XYZ therefore request for more information about ABC and finally decide to purchase automobile parts from ABC. To do this, XYZ places an order on the website of ABC. After receiving the order details, ABC company validates the information. As soon as the order is confirmed, the payment procedures are settled. Finally, ABC sends an acknowledgement of payment to the XYZ and delivers the goods as per the shipment details decided between two organizations. So this is the complete working of business to business e-commerce model. The advantages of this model, B2b model, it can effectively maintain the movement of the supply chain and the manufacturing process. It can automate corporate processes to deliver the right products and services quickly and cost effectively. The B2B model is predicted to become the large value sector of the industry within few years. This is said to be the fastest growing sector of e-commerce. Now let's move towards the business to consumer model, that is B2C model. So B2C e-commerce is the most popular e-commerce model. Business to consumer means that the sale is taking place between a business and a consumer, like when we buy a product from an online retailer. So let us try to understand this model with the help of the figure. So now in this figure, at one end, the seller party is a businessman and the buyer party is a consumer, a common man who wants to buy something from the business. Okay. Now what happens in this case? At the first stage, the seller businessman hosts the product details on the internet. Then at the second stage, the consumer accesses the product information, and at the third stage, the consumer places an order for the product on the internet. Then what happens at the fourth stage? The seller businessman receives an order, processes and dispatches the product to the buyer by courier or some another mediums. Okay, so in this way, the cycle gets completed. So this is the business to consumer model. So whatever we buy on internet with by using different apps or websites, all those comes under the business to consumer model. The B2C model involves transaction between businesses, organization, and consumers. It applies to any business organization that sells its product or services to consumers over the internet. These sites display product information in an online catalog and store it in a database. The B2C model also includes services like online banking, travel services, and health information. Let's consider a hypothetical example in which the transaction is conducted between business organization and a consumer. A business house ABC department store displays the sale range of product on their website abc.com. The detailed information of all their product is contained in a huge catalogs maintained by ABC departmental store. A consumer, Mr. Sharma, wants to buy a gift for his friend. He therefore logs on to the site of ABC department store and selects a gift from a catalog. He also gets a detailed information about the gift such as price, availability, discounts, and so on from their catalogs. Finally, when he decides to buy a gift, he places an order for the gift on their website. To place an order, he needs to specify his personal and bank card information on the website of ABC departmental store. This information is then validated by ABC departmental store and stored in their database. On verification of the information, the order is processed. Therefore, as you can see, the B2C model involves transaction between consumer and one or more businesses organization. The B2C model of e-commerce is more prone to security threats because individual consumer provide their bank card and personal information to the site of business organization. In addition, the consumer might doubt that his or her information is secured and used effectively by the business organization. Therefore, it becomes very essential for the business organization to provide security mechanism that can guarantee customer for securing his or her information. Now let us move towards the next business model, that is consumer to consumer model. In this particular model, at the both ends of the transaction, the consumers are involved. No business party is involved in this type of transaction. C2c e-commerce refers to the sale of goods or services to another consumer. Consumer to consumer sale takes place on platforms like eBay, Etsy, Fiverr, or OLX, etc. So let us try to understand this model with the help of the figure. So now you can see that in this figure, at the seller side, the consumer is there, and at the buyer side, the another consumer is there. So at the first step of this particular transaction or business model, what happens? The consumer, the seller consumer hosts the product on the portal, on the internet. Okay. Then at the second stage, what happens? The buyer consumer accesses the product information from the portal. Then the buyer consumer places an order on the portal. Okay, so in between there is one another factor which is called as a facilitator. Okay, so this is this may be one portal or some website. Okay, so at the next stage, the seller consumer or facilitator buys the product on the behalf of the buyer. Okay, and then at the last stage, it sells the product to the buyer. In this way, the cycle gets completed. The consumer to consumer model involves transaction between consumers. Here, a consumer sells directly to another consumer. eBay and Bazaar.com are common examples of online auction websites that provides consumers to advertise and sell their products online to another consumer. However, it is essential that both the seller and the buyer must register with the auction site. While the seller needs to pay a fixed fee to the online auction house to sell their products, the buyer can bid without paying any fee. This site brings the buyer and seller together to conduct deals. When a consumer plans to sell his product to other consumers on the website, he first needs to interact with the sites, which in this case acts as a facilitator of the overall transaction. Then the seller can host his product on the website, which in turn charges him for this. Any buyer can now browse the site to search for the product he is interested in. If the buyer comes across such a product, he places an order for the same on the website. The facilitator website purchases the product from the seller and then sells it to the buyer. Now, let's come towards the another business model, that is consumer to business, C2b. So consumer to business is when an individual sells their services or products to the business organization. C2b includes influencers offering exposure, photographers, consultants, freelance writers, etc. So let us try to understand this particular model with the help of the figure. Now, in this case, at one end of the transaction, the consumer is there who is playing the role of the seller. And at the other end of the transaction, a business is there. Okay, so let's say some company will be there at the other end. So at the first stage of the transaction, the consumer hosts the product on the portal. The business party at the other end, they accesses the product information from the portal and they place an order to the portal. Then the facilitator buys the product on the behalf of the buyer and sells the product to the buyer on behalf of the that particular consumer or that particular seller. Okay, so in this way the cycle of the transaction is completed. The C2b model involves a transaction that is conducted between the consumer and the business organization. It is similar to B2c model. However, the difference is that in this case, the consumer is the seller and the business organization is the buyer. In this kind of transaction, the consumer decides the price of a particular product rather than the supplier. This category includes individuals who sell products and services to organizations. For example, www.monster.com is a website on which a consumer can post his biodata portfolio for the services he can offer. Any business organization that is interested in deploying the services of the consumer can contact him and then employ him if suitable. The advantages and disadvantages of electronic commerce. E-commerce offers consumers the following advantages. The first advantage is convenience. E-commerce can occur 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Then increased selection. Many stores offer a wider array of products online than they carry in their brick and mortar counterparts, and many stores that solely exist online may offer consumers exclusive inventory that is unavailable elsewhere. E-commerce carries the following disadvantages. Limited customer service. If you are shopping online on a computer, you cannot simply ask an employee to demonstrate a particular model's features in person. And although some websites let you chat online with a staff member, this is not a typical practice. Then the another disadvantage is lack of instant uh, gratification. When you buy an item online, you must wait for it uh, to be shipped to your home or office. However, retailers like Amazon make the waiting game a little bit less painful by offering same day delivery as a premium option for the select products. Inability to touch the product. Online images do not necessarily convey the whole story about the item, and so e-commerce purchases can be unsatisfying when the products received do not match consumers' expectations. Case in point, an item of clothing may be made from the shoddier fabric than its online image indicates. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of the e-commerce. So now in next lectures, we will see some another elements of digital marketing. Thank you very much.